Hello and welcome to our Le Mans 24 hours review video for the 2024 edition of the race. I'm Rob Hansford and joining me as ever is Toby Trice. Hi Toby, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, buddy. I'm good. It's a great to have another episode of Straight Cut, and yeah, welcome to you guys tuning in.
Yeah, we're a little bit delayed on this one. There's been a lot going on since the race happened for us. Obviously, Toby, you've been racing, haven't you? It's been an eventful few weeks of racing for you.
Yeah, I've had a bit of a mad one. Maybe we'll touch that today, but it's been wild, and I know you've been very busy with all the cool things you're up to too.
Yeah, but obviously now it's time to get down to it and actually go back through this year's race. Go over some of the predictions we made, and it was a great race, wasn't it?
Mate, what a Le Mans! Like what a Le Mans! It was probably one of the most entertaining Le Mans in a very long time. The hypercar class really did perform well, and it was just such a good race right through, wasn't it? I mean, so much so that actually on the TV coverage, a lot of people were kind of complaining there wasn't actually that much GT3 coverage for the live feed. But that's just because the hypercar class was just phenomenal all the way through the race, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I get why GT3, LMGTE fans are kind of a little bit disappointed by the fact obviously the GT3 cars didn't get shown as much as they wanted. However, you know, it's a really good thing for the championship overall, I think, in that there was so much going on in hypercar, especially being, a 24-hour race. It can get spread out. We've seen so often in the past of cars disappearing off and a lack of competition, and you're just waiting for reliability issues to come into play. But we had none of that. It was wheel to wheel racing all 24 hours, wasn't it? It was nobody could take the foot off the gas at all, really, in the slightest.
Well, it's a 24-hour sprint now, isn't it? I mean, when you watch the onboard of the pole lap and you see just how fast those hypercars are, the thing looks like it's in fast forward, and they're driving not quite at that pace. Obviously, during the race, obviously they back it off a little bit for obviously engine wear and tire wear, etc. But like those cars are sprinting hard for 24 hours, and it's really remarkable to see just how it all kind of plays out after the end. We had a what was it, like top six cars was set
Yeah.
within the lead lap, and I think there was only a few seconds between first and second at the end of the race. It was mind blowing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, we obviously have a look at, qualifying to start off with. That was quite eventful, wasn't it? Right at the end, we thought Porsche might be on for the overall pole. Then it was like Cadillac at one point as well. Ferrari kind of missed themselves out on that final lap. It was that was a hectic session, wasn't it? And obviously, Porsche Penske ended up doing it and getting that top spot. But even that went down to sort of the dying seconds of the session, didn't it?
Yeah, didn't it? And what a lap that was. I mean, like literally, it was like he looked like he was driving a non-aeroed car, and that thing is fully aeroed. That is a proper bit of kit, and like he was literally crashing every corner, like opposite lock, virtually every corner on the limit. What a lap! I mean, like maybe we'll put the link below of the actual lap itself. But honestly, it just blew my mind. If you haven't seen it, definitely go and check it out because it was quite something.
Yeah, and to be fair, I was really surprised because at one point, I thought it's been nailed on for Bordeaux, especially after, with the red flag coming out and
Yeah.
having, only a few minutes left. But Alex Lynn pulled an absolute blinder of a laugh out in that number two Cadillac. And I thought he'd done it. I
Yeah,
thought
yeah,
there's
it looked
no
good.
way, but there's no way it can be beaten. And then up pops Kevin Estre and goes, no, sorry, this is mine. I'll have that. Thanks very much.
In
Um,
typical Kevin Extra fashion
it was
at
it
the
was
last knock-ins.
it was a great session. And obviously, beforehand, missing all of this was obviously Jota. Obviously had a big crash, didn't they?
Oh, mate, yeah, what an unfortunate way to start their Le Mans 24 hour. But I mean, my predictions for this was wanting to see the Jota cars, right on that top step. But obviously they had quite a distraction leading up to the race with that huge rebuild. But what a remarkable achievement that was to get that car out. The damage looked pretty bad, and I understand there was some fundamental chassis changes that they meant that they had to actually get a whole new chassis put in. And I
Yeah,
think I think Jota made a statement that what normally takes 3 weeks, they had something like 30 hours or something like that to
yeah,
actually get the car done. Like that was incredible effort.
yeah. Obviously, at number 12 car, it just kind of it was completely rebuilt from the ground up. And what I really liked, it was real Le Mans spirit for me. This is what Le Mans is about. In that they weren't just told, right, that's it. You're allowed to to start from the pit lane or start from, the grid, whatever, they were actually allowed to shake the car down at an airport runway near the circuit, so they could at least make sure everything was running well. And obviously, special dispensation given by WEC to do that, and I thought that was a great decision, being allowed to sort of allow them to do that because of the effort they'd gone to get the car in a position where it could run was monumental. So I was really pleased to see that was allowed to take place and give them a little bit of preparation with a new chassis.
Yeah, and I think it just kind of like highlights just the success they had to get that car back on track. There's a lot of preparation goes into just arrive at Le Mans competitive, ready to race anyway, let alone having to rebuild the car within the 11th hour. But yeah, great decision by WEC and the right decision. And I'm sure all of the other drivers and cars and teams supported that. I've just recently had a mishap myself at my previous round at Alton Park, and similar sort of thing where the team had to kind of rebuild the car 25 hours later, and wasn't sure if I was going to start the race. And similar sort of decision, I was able to not qualify, but to actually start at the back of the pros in the race itself. And I think it's the right decision because it's one of those things where a team has to dig deep to make that rebuild happen, and their success should be warranted with being able to start where they should be, right? So yeah, congrats on WEC for making that choice.
Yeah, and then obviously lights went out on the Saturday, and it all kicked off immediately, didn't it? It was just wheel to wheel racing, as we said. Ferrari looked really on it. Cadillac fell through early doors, didn't they? We didn't quite have the pace to stay with the likes of Ferrari in the sort of early phase of the race.
Yeah, it was weird, isn't it? Because like Cadillac showing their kind of like hand in qualifying, I thought actually they'd probably be thereabouts in that opening sort of couple of hours, but they did sort of fall off the wayside quite quickly. Perhaps their qualifying pace to their race car setup was not optimal for them. That knowing that the car is you can do the lap right, so it was just perhaps a case that they didn't get the strategy right. But yeah, Ferrari were punching and actually straight off the bat, Toyota pretty much were working their way up quite quickly as well, weren't they? Certainly in the mix.
Yeah, and I think that was fairly expected, wasn't it? Before the race started, it was going to be
Sure.
Toyota and Ferrari at the front. I think more the surprise was actually, and obviously it was helped by the rain coming down and people being stuck with what what do you do on strategy? Do you come into the pits because it's not quite raining enough, or do you try and stay it out, but it's a little bit too greasy for the dries? It was kind of that half and half, wasn't it? And that strategy decision from the number 83 AF Corsa Ferrari, allowed it to sort of put itself in the mix. Essentially, a privateer car. I mean, I know it's essentially the same team in all but name, but a privateer class car anyway. Putting itself right at the very forefront of the race, putting itself into the lead with Robert Kubica behind the wheel. Um, that was a surprise, wasn't it? Because I don't think anyone really saw that yellow Ferrari coming through to the front from where it qualified. I think it was where was it, 12th, right, qualified. But yeah,
But it was there.
yeah,
It was there, wasn't it? But I think that's the cool thing with them with the new regs now is the fact that there's no intermediate tire. It is a slick or a wet. There's no halfway house. So the decision when the track is in between is a difficult one because they go out on cold tires anyway. They haven't got blankets anymore for heating the tires up. So they've got to work a slick quite hard to actually get out on the car and get that pace. And if it's greasy, it's really difficult to do, especially in a hypercar, I'm sure. And the wet tire is a proper wet tire. It's going to overheat really quickly in not for wet conditions. So yeah, it was a remarkable decision they made and paid off, right? So they were very happy with that.
yeah, and it proved as well when everyone converged back onto the same tires. Strategies were still slightly different, but
Yeah.
that number 83 Ferrari was still on the money with the 50 to 51, and obviously the Toyota as well. It was right there, and there was some a good hard fighting between the cars for several hours.
Yeah, I mean, at one point they were like three wide, weren't they?
Yeah.
That was pretty special to watch. I held my breath watching that, but yeah, it was a long, close racing period. That was, wasn't it?
Yeah, and obviously some penalties came into play. Ferrari picked up a couple of penalties. The number 83 Ferrari, when obviously Knight hit, also picked up a penalty with that crash with the BMW down the Mulsanne.
Oh, it was so
Whilst,
unfortunate.
yeah, I mean, you're trying to overtake the BMW, but then trying to, get through the gap whilst you're trying to lap the Porsche. Um, yeah, clipped, obviously sent Dries Van Voor out of the race. He's come out with some quite controversial comments since, alleging that it may have been done deliberately. I mean, I don't for a second think that's really the case. Especially when you look at the onboards and you look at the gaps. It was Kubica misjudged it, and he got penalised for that. And I think that was fair and correct. But I don't think there was any malice or any intent there by his move.
No, I mean it's very difficult, right? I mean they're at the point where fatigue does start setting in, concentration starts becoming an issue at that point, doesn't it? You've had a long period of racing at this point, and it was pretty much threading the eye of the needle between the slower GT3 car and obviously getting the move done on the BMW. There's not a lot of room there for three cars, and they're traveling at huge speeds. Any tiny piece of contact is only going to cause quite a big crash at that point. It'd have been different if it was a slow speed corner or just out of an exit, where the speed doesn't really make that much of a difference. But at that speed, they're traveling, aren't they? And a tiny little bit of contact, as you can see, made an awful outcome for the BMW. It was such a shame because it'd been nice to see them finish the race. No one wants to see a DNF, but yeah, making it was a deliberate attempts, and I'm not really sure that that's the case. I think it was just an error, and like you say, the penalty that he got it seemed fair for me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, what was remarkable as well is that the 83 Ferrari, obviously fell out of contention for a while with that penalty, but ended up getting itself back into the hunt before subsequently, being forced to retire with only was it a couple of hours left
Yeah,
with the hybrid failure. Um, Obviously put an end to the 83's race. I mean, I think one of the biggest surprises for me, really, though, especially in that kind of first half, was the fact that Porsche were nowhere.
yeah,
Well, they weren't nowhere. They were still sort of fairly swift at the the front, in the opening stages with the Ferrari. But as the time went on, slowly kind of fell backwards. Didn't really sort of have the pace over the whole distance with Ferrari or the Toyota in the end. Um, it was, I mean, I know it was very tight, wasn't it, at the end between the number 51 Ferrari and the number 6 Porsche Penske, because they only finished within like a second of each other.
yeah.
But I was kind of expecting them to be a bit closer to the front.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that was my prediction anyway, was to try and, I wanted one of the Jota cars at the front. But it certainly, the Penske Porsche, I'd wanted to see them win. But yeah, you're right. They just didn't quite just have that last bit to be right in that mix for the win from the get go. And I think the thing is with Le Mans these days is it is less about reliability and more about pushing every single lap for every single minute, of every hour of that race. And it felt like for me perhaps there's just a bit more on the table, and maybe there's still some development to go with that car to get the most out of it, because we know it can win races, right? Obviously we saw at Spa it done well, so we know it can win races. But yeah, Ferrari just had that they just had that edge. But I think really it's probably apt to say at this point that last little pit stop that Ferrari had, and they were kind of limping it round just to try and save energy. That really for me was the deciding factor, wasn't it? At that point, if they could just hang on for that last bit of energy and not need the extra pit stop, then the win was theirs, and they got very very fortunate in that position, I think.
Yeah, Nicholas Nielsen did a great job with fuel saving
Yeah,
in those final few laps. You're watching, you look at the telemetry, and it's like, final lap, and he's got like 3-4% left, and you're like, is he actually going to make it around the lap?
yeah, but
Um,
it was long before then though that he was like his lap times were they were good, like 10-12 seconds down on the car behind. They were really like, we've got to drive slower if we're not going to finish. And fair play to manage that, because that is a huge amount of pressure. Because I think that at that point you become, as a driver, you kind of come out of your rhythm of what the car's doing. And when you're tired and you're not in the rhythm, that's when mistakes can kind of cut in. And so it's easy to sit here and say that they got quite fortunate with the fact they were saving that energy. But actually, it takes quite a driver to manage that and still keep the car, turning its wheels and not making mistakes and dropping off the road. And imagine if that had happened, it'd have been awful for them. But yeah, fair play.
Yeah, it was a great call in the end. Obviously, it hung on. The Toyota was closing in at about 3-4 seconds a lap, but in the end, hung on to win by 14.2 seconds. And it's yeah, 24 hours of racing, and it's split by 14 seconds is a good race.
Yeah,
Um, I think the only downside to the race was potentially how long we had, under safety car for. We went through, was it nearly 5 hours under safety car through the night? It
It was
was,
a long time. It done me a
yeah,
favour though, to be fair, because I was, I sit here and say I was tired, but I was watching the race at home and I see that safety car come out, and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to get some Zeds because the weather looks poor for forever. And yeah, I woke up in the morning and flicked it on, and hadn't missed any actual racing, so it was alright for me.
I mean, what do you think can be done about that for next year? Because obviously the weather, these cars can only cope with so much water. We know that it's, very sort of downforce driven cars. Um, but out of a 24-hour race and five of it's under a safety car because of conditions, it'd be a bit different if it was so many barriers needed repairing or things like that. But when it is down to the weather, I mean, it's better than a red flag, obviously, but it's not ideal, is it?
It is a difficult one. It is a difficult one, and I think because of the mention of a red flag, I think if if it gets to the position where you've got a great race that the conditions are so bad that most of the grid chuck themselves off the road and end their own races, then you don't then have much of a race over the 24-hour periods. It's kind of like a double-edged sword, really, isn't it? You keep under safety car while it's really dangerous to race, so that at least cars are still moving, so that when conditions improve, you then still have a race. Or do you continue racing and there's then a huge risk of obviously multiple cars having crashes, possibly a red flag. These cars are fast. You don't want to obviously put anyone at absolute danger. But then I suppose from the purist, that's the whole point, isn't it? Is to race for 24 hours. So it is definitely a difficult one. I myself would probably welcome a safety car if the conditions were that bad, just because I don't, you don't want to be
Yeah.
unnecessarily taking big risks. But I'm sure the race fan. I mean, let's put it to the viewers, right? I mean, what do you think? Should it be a safety car? Should let them crack on and continue racing? I think that's it'd be nice to hear what people think, really, I guess.
Well, I'm also just wondering, is there something that can be done, for situations like that, with the tires? Is there a different tire that they can go to that can help shift more water? I mean,
Probably
how
not.
extreme are the extreme? That's exactly probably not.
Yeah.
But it is a tough one. Um, it just felt like at times the rain was bad at times, but it also felt like there were periods where
It eased
it was,
up.
yeah, eased up, and it's like, why are we still racing under these conditions? Under the safety car under these conditions, and yeah, it would have just been nice to see him a little bit earlier. That's the other problem, isn't it, with the new safety car system they had in place for this year? It took a while, didn't it? It took quite a few phases to get through before you get racing again. So you've got, by the time race control have said, yeah, we're going to go green flag racing, you've got still about 15, 20 minutes before they can get them all themselves into a position where you can go racing again. I think that sort of compounded matters further, really, didn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, they call it for safety, and I do get that. So I do think it's an important part of it. But yeah, it ended to be a great spectacle, and it was a great race, and cars remained in the field fighting for the win. So for me, I think it was probably the right decision. I don't think there's much more we can do with the way those conditions were, really. Despite obviously it was it was, but then for the most part, most people were in bed at that point or camping, and they're going to go to sleep. So it was probably it was probably just really boring for the drivers sitting around doing what
we
80k is it? Yeah.
I mean, there's a few I think getting cramp and we're just pleading to get out of the car, and obviously pit crews going, no, stay in the car, you go
because
around again.
because that at that point, that's actually very tiring. Like
Yeah.
safety car periods in any race, it's you sort of build up this high adrenaline. You sat on the edge and you're pushing. When safety cars come out, it's quite easy to slip into that relaxed mode because you're driving well within the limits of the car, even in those conditions. You're still well within the limits. It's just like a long motorway drive at that point. You're driving at normal sort of road speeds, and it's all a bit dull and boring. So it's so easy to then not to get more fatigued and tired. So that when it does switch back on, it's you've got to get yourself back up there again, and that's quite a difficult thing. And I'm sure drivers were begging just to get out because they just probably wanted to go to sleep. I'd have hated that stint.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to sort of our predictions, I think we were fairly spot on. I mean, obviously Jota. ended up eighth and ninth overall in the end. So I think
Yeah,
you kind of
wasn't happy about
lost a little
that.
bit there. I was quite happy because I said I thought Ferrari would win, but I also said I thought Toyota would be the dark horse and would be right there in the mix. So I'm glad and take bragging rights
You look
for
quite smug
getting
about
that.
it, Rob.
Yeah, I am. I got to say, I was quite pleased that my prediction was on point for that one. I mean LMP2, we were both kind of right on that one as well, weren't we? United Autosports crossing the line there um,
Yeah,
to win class, didn't they?
yeah, they were great. They were great. I mean, I didn't really follow that much of the LMP2 race. For me, it was, the hypercar cast was great, and I'm a GT3 fan, so I was, kept trying to keep tabs on that. But yeah, United Autosports once again have just done a stellar job at what they do. For me, they are the best in the business when it comes to P2 cars.
Yeah, and obviously, it was AF Corsa that won the LMP2 Pro-Am class as well with Ben Barnicoat was another, that was another car that you picked out in
Yeah,
the previous session. They had a good run.
yeah, and they were. I think they were leading at one point. They had a pretty good. They kicked off really well. Their Ram must have done a phenomenal job because obviously when you're up against an all pro outfit compared to Pro Am, there is quite a disadvantage having a slow Ram. But actually, I think the Am in that team really fundamentally is giving them huge success, and to take the Pro Am win, I think Ben Barnicoat would have been really happy with that.
Yeah, and LMGT3, there was a lot going on. I mean, for the early stages of the race, it really looked like McLaren could take the spoils there, didn't it?
Yeah, and I think we spoke about it in our preview video that it was going to be certainly a car to watch, and they did have the pace, and they did definitely look like they were going to be crawling up there for a good result. But yeah, I was really happy to see a Porsche win, which
Yeah,
is my prediction.
yeah, it was, and it was Manthey as well, wasn't it? So it was a strong race, and obviously Team WRT did really well, finishing runner up, and obviously Darren Lung, friend of yours, obviously in that car as well.
Yeah, he did such a good job. I was texting him throughout the Le Mans, just how are things going, and he was basically saying how frantic the night stints were for him, and sort of he'd done his stints by I think the early hours of the morning, and just kind of then sitting there, fingers crossed, hoping they'd do all right. And I think they were running. They climbed back up the order because I think they did drop down a little bit, worked back up, and then obviously maintained quite a solid second place in that last phase of the race, but. Yeah, what an achievement for him. It was proper cool to see him stood on the podium. There's like a selfie picture of him with thousands of people behind holding a Le Mans trophy. And yeah, I'm sure they wanted the win, like you do. You're not fully happy until you got a win, but to stand on the podium at Le Mans, I mean, fair play to the team. WRT did a great job. I know Darren did a fine job in the car, and yeah, it was wicked to see that. It was really cool to see someone that I've raced with, and yeah, mega result for them.
Yeah, and the Protons did well just behind. Obviously, both of them came a line of Sterling third and fourth in the Mustangs. It was quite nice to see the Mustangs there. On the bottom step of the rostrum, and fifth place, Iron Dames. They got through to the finish. Obviously, not necessarily the result they might have hoped to get a little bit higher up the order, but it was a solid result for the race they had.
Yeah, because also the Iron Dames got knocked out. They got taken by I think it might have been one of the Penske Porsches or maybe the Ferrari. I can't remember what it was now, but it was through the Porsche curves they got clipped and taken round. Thankfully, not too much damage, but it did cost them quite a lot of time in the pit lane getting that thing sorted out and recovered. So to get where they were at, I think is a remarkable achievement. I mean, you mentioned in our preview that they would be the ones to watch to win potentially outright, and without that, it's possible they could have been there for it. So they've done an amazing job, those girls.
Yeah, and I think they're kind of showing what is really capable for women in motorsport, and that gender has no relevance,
Absolutely.
especially in the sports car world. And as you say, it's a shame they got that got clipped down in the Porsche curbs, but I think it's a really strong showing from them, and I think there's plenty more to come from them as well, especially later through the season at further wet grounds. And obviously, as we mentioned, McLaren, with Inception Racing, they were there for so long at the front. They fell backwards, down the order. Bit of a disappointment, but I think it gives them a good foundation for next year to build on.
Yeah, because I mean, let's face it, right? This is their first entry back into the Le Mans 24 hour. It's a big step for them to take, having not been around for so long. In this particular series, so they should be really proud of what they've managed to do there. It shows they've got a good car. It shows they've got potential. They're going to be about for a while. I'm assuming now in Le Mans 24. So I'll be looking forward to seeing how they progress throughout the next 12 months and back into the next Le Mans race. It'd be really interesting to see how they get on.
Yeah, and it's all done for another year though. It's a shame it flies around so fast, doesn't it? It's a busy period while it exists, and then it just feels like it's never happened, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a mad one, Le Mans, isn't it? There's such a big build up. It's such a great event. And like I say, it's kind of over so quickly, and yeah, it's such a long race. It's such a big deal. But straight away, you're just looking forward to next year. It's such a cool place to go and be. And yeah, a bit of a shout out to my Orange Bobble Hat Army guys. I know quite a few of them was out there camping, and there was many bobble hats around the Le Mans circuit waving the flag for the GT3 guys, because I know they're huge GT3 fans. And I've had some kind messages for them saying one day, boy, you gotta be here, be racing, because it'll be wicked to proper support the bobble army in a big way. But yeah, one day I hope I'll be there, Rob. It'll be nice to compete myself and go through all that drama and stress.
You say that now, in the moment might be a bit different.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a tall order, isn't it? But I'd love to do it. I mean, it just looks the whole event looks great, and I think the whole build up, when they bring the cars out onto the street and the whole kind of parade, all of the practice sessions, qualifying, the hyper pole now, I think is really great. Yeah, Le Mans is just special.
Yeah, and obviously going forwards, we've got a couple of weeks. Was 11th, is it the 11th? No, 14th, sorry, of July. 6 hours of Sao Paulo next, in Brazil. What are your thoughts on that?
It's gonna be an interesting one. It's a great circuit. I really look forward to watching that there this year. I think it'll be interesting, certainly after Le Mans. See how the hypercar class does there. I actually think Porsche will probably have a better advantage there, just because of the nature of the circuit, and it's less about that sort of top end. It's more about grip, that track, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's more kind of grip. It'll be an interesting one to see how it goes. The BMW might be one to watch there as well. They're going to be obviously very hungry to return in a big way. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting race, that.
Yeah, and obviously the big news to come out from Le Mans week beyond the race itself was obviously the calendar, and it changes for next year. You can see some of that, in the video, in our latest video that we've released. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Obviously, manufacturers in hypercar need to have 2 cars next year. Calendar remains the same. Are you happy with that?
Um, yeah and no. I mean, I think it's quite nice to mix it up a little bit. Um, Despite the calendar being pretty decent anyway, I think the Qatar track I'd probably want to jump out, swap it
What
for
would you
something
replace
else.
it for?
I don't know. I don't know. I'd love to see Silverstone back in the wet program. Um, it's kind of sad that the home of British Motorsport, Silverstone being such a great track for this kind of racing. I'd love to see the hypercar class be there, and yeah, for me that I would prefer to see the Qatar race be swapped out and Silverstone being dropped in. I think that would be a better format, and that's not just because I'm British. I just think that the track slows better, and I think it would just be really cool to see wet back at back on British soil, really.
And with the manufacturers requiring 2 cars, Aston Martin came out, within 2 minutes, released their press release saying that they'll have 2 Valkyries on the grid next year.
Can't wait.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think it's good, and obviously the grid for hypercars has been extended as well, so you know to allow for that. And I really think that forcing manufacturers to have 2 cars on the grid, one, it means there's real commitment from the manufacturers and they can't go out the championship half-heartedly. Um, I think, with 1 car is people can say, well, budget can hold you back and things like that. That's fair enough. But if you want a proper manufacturer's championship, you need to kind of have everything on a level footing or as close to a level footing as possible. So when it comes to that championship side in terms of the manufacturers championship, I think it's really good that everyone will have 2 cars, everyone's in the same boat, everyone has equal chance then of winning the championship. It will just come down to how well you execute your racing across the season. So I think it's a good thing from a from that perspective. Um, but it's gonna really change the structure of it again for next year, isn't it? In terms of you know how do these sort of teams with smaller budgets like Lamborghini, for example, how do they go about managing two cars when they kind of that's if they continue, but they're borderline and at limit with one car. So you add another one into the mix, it's going to really change dynamics for a few teams out there.
Yeah, and I think this is where, it's a huge shout out to sponsorship and investment from, commercial partners because, manufacturers need that support, right? They need support from investment to make these kind of things happen. And ultimately, it kind of feeds down to, buying, selling road vehicles, performance road vehicles. So manufacturers like Lamborghini, if they're serious about making this a long term structure, it will help ultimately their sort of their sales, I believe. Historically, it's always been like that for Porsche, Ferrari, because motorsport's at the heart of what they do. I always find it a bit weird that Peugeot are in that hypercar class because they don't really have that, that ultimate performance road vehicle, like the other manufacturers. So credit to them actually, because for them it's quite a different. I would say it's quite a different ambition. They're going at it from a different standpoint, but super awesome to see Aston Martin take a stand with the Valkyrie. I think that's going to be a real weapon to see how well that'll perform. I mean, as a road car, that thing is just a monster anyway. So it'll be wicked to see that as a proper hypercar. And yeah, good luck to them because I'm a bit of a fan of Aston Martin as well. But it is a challenge. But I think this is the right challenge that manufacturers need, and ultimately that then drives this game forward. It drives technology forward. We move forward as an industry in motorsport, and all of that kind of feeds down. And Le Mans really should be the pinnacle for manufacturers to stand themselves at the top, because it's such a big, audacious goal to go and win it. And if you can dominate it as a manufacturer, you're doing a half decent job, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's it's opening eyes to other manufacturers as well. Like Zach Brown after the race came out and said, well, with these changes, McLaren, it might come back on. McLaren looked at it once and didn't really pursue it because they've got so much going on. But it's reopened that thought process of going, well, actually, do we put a hypercar entry in as a full factory effort? I mean, people keep referring, McLaren as McLaren in LMGT3. I think it's easy to forget that that's not a manufacturer operation. They're customer teams, and running the McLarens is not McLaren running the McLarens. So to have a full manufacturer effort from them and from McLaren to consider that within hypercar, it says a lot of where the championship is going at the moment.
Yeah, and that's only being fed by the competition, right? Because I think the fact that they've extended this homologation for a little bit longer, it allows those manufacturers to have that appetite of, is it worth our investment? And now, especially that it would be, because obviously there's a longer period of time they can run these cars with. I think it'd be fantastic to see McLaren and the likes jumping in and having a go. The more manufacturers we can get to it, the better it is for us fans. There's more opportunity then for driver development as well. So for racers like myself that obviously want to progress up the ladder, there's more development there. That opens up seats in other categories like P2 and the GT3 class. It's just all good for the sport, and the more competition we can generate, the better this sport becomes, right?
Yeah, definitely, and it's going to be interesting to see where it all goes from here. But that brings our Le Mans 24 Hours review video to a close. Thanks again for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah, mega. That's us at Straight Cut.